Hello my friends, let's talk about Axiom Verge. Before we get into it, let me just say that this game was amazing, and if you haven't played it, it is well worth the investment. The mysterious cyber horror aesthetic, the sudden feeling of depth when looking at some of the backgrounds, and the exponential feeling of escalation you get as you obtain new weapons and upgrade tools is thrilling, and at times overwhelming. But above all was its elegant delivery of three different schools of thought related to the philosophy of science in the order of a deep and complex narrative world. Those philosophies are the many worlds theory, panpsychism, and solipsism. Quote, all data are filtered, observation is necessarily theory-laden, end quote. Norwood Russell Hanson. Let's begin with a quick look at the title Axiom Verge. An axiom, meaning that which is turned around, is an idea that cannot itself be proven, but lays the foundation for a functional evaluation of other information, and drawing further conclusions to be considered true within the system. The most famous example of this is Euclid's The Elements, the second best-selling book of all time, coming just under the Bible. Euclid established 5 postulates, 5 axioms, extrapolating them one by one, and in doing so, laid the foundation for all geometry and physics until the 20th century, at which point new, conflicting observations led to the creation of special and general relativity and quantum physics, which required new axioms to be created in order to work, new mathematics. And then also the word verge, meaning the edge or bending toward. The title suggests a reality in which we are moving towards the fundamental principle by which we understand things. This story begins the way any good sci-fi story does, with an unexpected lab explosion that thrusts us, a character named Trace, into a dark and bloody world like no one has ever seen, the world of Sudra. As we explore this world, we encounter beings called Rusalki, godlike technological entities left by a now deceased race called Sudrans. They have been broken down by a being called Athetos, an invader from another world. As we explore this infected planet, we learn more about its history, somewhat from Elsinova and the other Rusalki, but mostly from little notes and messages we find around the world. Elsinova, in a proper hero's journey-esque setup, informs us that we possess what is called a pattern mind, a special and nearly unexplainable gift. The closest explanation we get is that a pattern mind is someone with the ability to manipulate matter, and that it will be necessary to defeat the wicked Athetos, who also possesses this pattern mind characteristic. The second clue we get to understanding how we came to this alien world comes after we reactivate the Rusalki's power filter and repair drones, and Elsinova becomes conscious enough to speak in complete sentences. She tells us of a duality of existence in this setting, the world stream in which the planet Sudra lies, and the breach. The breach is hinted to be some dangerous external space that used to be adjacent to the planet, but now surrounds the planet due to Athetos' breach attractor machine. We also learn that another Rusalki named Ophelia had entered the breach to pull Trace into their world. This simplifies the goal of defeating Athetos into 2 steps. First, find and repair Ophelia, and second, destroy Athetos' breach attractor. Our third clue comes from the Rusalki named Veruska, who, now repaired, speaks cryptically about being a carnivore to us. Ophelia politely dismisses this weirdo among weirdos and explains that Veruska's function as a machine was to create mind worlds, to which Veruska retorts that we all make mind worlds. Trace basically ignores this in favor of shooting more monsters and finding more cool upgrades. And our fourth clue comes from the world and notes explaining the fall of this planet. They detail a world that advanced in science and technology to such a rapid extent that the pendulum of progress swung violently in the other direction. First, the Sudrans feared and abandoned their creations, then forgot that they were the creators, and eventually came to worship the Rusalki as gods. The only Sudrans to survive were the followers of Athetos, who are now mutant monstrosities that ramble like madmen, saying things about loving Athetos, distrusting Athetos, becoming Athetos, and most confusing of all, accusing us, Trace, of being Athetos. So let's review. First, we and Athetos possess a pattern mind, the ability to manipulate matter. Second, the Rusalki fished us from the breach, and Athetos is entrapping the world of Sudra by attracting the breach around the planet. Third, Veruska tells us that everyone is creating mind worlds. And fourth, the planet of Sudra culturally abandoned technology and experienced biological devastation and mass extinction after Athetos arrived. Yet none of these pieces connect until we stumble across the most important note in the game, Axiom 1. It reads as such: A. All algorithms are universal and valid regardless of whether they are executed. B. Cognition is a sub-algorithm whose behavior is to perceive properties of the parent algorithm describing it. C. Any algorithm giving rise to cognitive entities will be perceived as reality by the entities described. In this note, the word algorithm essentially acts as a catch-all term for a fundamental physical law presented from a mathematical lens. This presents physical laws not as absolutes, but as mere functions among many others, with the first axiom stating that all algorithms, all physical laws are true, only distinguished by if they happen to be operational. It firmly establishes a unique take on the many worlds theory of ontology. The many worlds theory came about in the early days of quantum theory before it firmed up as a true science, and basically stated that any possibility does in fact become actuality, and all those infinitely other universes exist separately and in parallel to the one we experience. The second axiom states that observation and abstract thought are also an algorithm, a fundamental physical law, the function of which is to identify whatever physical laws are in place. By asserting that cognition is a sub-algorithm, the axiom is stating that cognition isn't guaranteed, while also asserting that consciousness is omnipresent in the physical world. Such an axiom would firmly establish a take on panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is present in all matter, and that self-awareness would thus be emergent in any sufficiently complex system as true. Furthermore, this part of the axiom asserts that because the universe is panpsychic and self-perceiving, that the cognitive theory of Douglas Hofstadter's I am a strange loop is not merely true of individuals, but true of the universe itself. But moving on to the third part of the axiom, initially it seems harmless, like a logical conclusion of the second part of the axiom, but itself reveals a radical extrapolation. By adding here the concept of reality as cognition confirming the algorithm, the physical laws that gave rise to it, the axiom must admit that should a cognitive entity somehow perceive some other, non-executed physical law, that physical law becomes real, becomes executed. And this asserts a specific version of solipsism, the idea that there is no reality outside a person's cognitive experience, but centering the observer of solipsism as a relationship between an individual cognitive entity, a person, and the self-aware panpsychic universe. But what sort of person could actually accomplish such a perceptive feat? The answer is a scientist. After all, what is a scientist if not someone who can manipulate matter, a pattern mind, Athetos, who perceived the change in algorithms just enough to reach Sudra, a world that is just on the edge of the boundary between worlds. Thanks just to the information we gained about the world, combined with the assertions of the axioms, what follows in the story is less of a surprise and more of a foregone conclusion. And that is precisely why Trace adopts a foregone concluded attitude when Ophelia tells us that we are Athetos. Just a younger version, before the struggle of facing a world that refused to change made Athetos bitter, jaded, and resentful. But why would Athetos have been rejected so vehemently? Well, that comes down to the nature of axioms, and why we accept the ones that we do. As we discussed at the start, axioms are not able to be proved. They are necessary to ground any rational system so that ideas within the system can be evaluated. See Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem for more on why that is, but are never themselves provable, even if it was empirical evidence that causes us to create a new system. So I repeat, why do we accept the axioms that we do? Because the axioms are useful. And by useful, I don't mean convenient, self-confirming, or ethically more comfortable. I mean that doing so allows humanity to realize some kind of progress to solve problems, and then create new questions. But there is a problem in this too. How then do we determine usefulness? That the progress was made, that it gets us closer to understanding and satisfying the truth of reality. Well, the answer to that isn't going to be very satisfying either. The progress is determined by its own fundamental axiom. That axiom is this: that an axiom can only be useful if it is an accurate depiction of reality. New axioms can only be more useful if they more accurately reflect the universe. And it's this fundamental postulate of human thinking that shows why these ideas of the many worlds theory, panpsychism, and solipsism are so ridiculed and rejected. Yes, they are interesting as thought experiments. Their conclusions are sometimes very convenient as explanations to our current questions. But their axioms are not useful. They don't solve problems or enable action in our reality, because the axioms only serve to establish belief in things inherently external from our ability to see it, to evaluate it. So imagine Athetos' frustration, his anger, when, after an entire career of ridicule, despite public notoriety, he finally achieves a functional way to demonstrate the usefulness of his axioms. The world of Sudra existing in a state of liminality that enables one to breach into these other worlds. But what he finds is a society that has abandoned this potential out of fear, precisely because it was dangerous. It was too useful. Nothing could have been more slighting. Still, committing total biological genocide by weaponizing your own cells into a mutating virus just so you can say, "I told you so," to the nerds who bullied him, just so that he could get revenge? Athetos kinda needs to get over himself. Calm that ego. Thank you for watching, my friends. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. New philosophic evaluations of video games and anime come out every week. If you did like the video, I would really appreciate if you also hit the like button. That really is the best way we have right now to get this video in front of other people who may be interested. Feel free to bring up any comments or questions you had about the philosophical systems that were mentioned in this video down in the comments below. I hope to see you next week, and remember, stay true.